Hello, hi. My name is Angelo Lopez. I am a Filipino American editorial cartoonist based in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I have the deep honor today to speak to two wonderful Pulitzer Prize winning editorial cartoonists, Jack Ohman and Adam Zyglis. Am I pronouncing your last name right?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. And Adam is a past president of the Association of American Editorial Cartoonists. And Jack is the current president of the AAEC. And today we'll be having a talk on both their individual careers and their opinions on the wider editorial cartooning profession. So thank you both for speaking to this allergy ridden cartoonist. So thank you.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. So, okay, I guess I'll just start up by just asking, who are your cartoonist heroes and heroines, and how did you both become interested and get started in editorial cartooning? Oh, either one of you can
Oh,
start. Yeah.
I'll start. Um, I was supposed to become governor of Oregon or Minnesota. Something happened there. I worked in politics when I was a teenager in Minnesota in the 70s, and I was an intern at the Minnesota Democratic Party office, which is called the DFL back there. And then I started doing advanced work. I advanced for Vice President Mondale on 4 trips, and I did 1 presidential trip. And then I was a driver, advance man for a congressional candidate in 1978. And so I needed a way to put myself through school. And, during Watergate, just backing up, I moved to Washington, D.C. in March 1968. And I was 7. And the world exploded in April through June of 1968. I remember watching Washington, D.C. burning after Martin Luther King was killed. And I went to Robert F. Kennedy's burial as a child at Arlington and got right next to the hearse and the gravesite. It was terrible. And so I wound up becoming very, preternaturally politically aware. And so we got the Evening Star. We didn't get the Post. The Post was the morning paper. And so, but I looked at the cartoons in the Post or in the Star, and God, I want to say it was Gib Crockett's cartoons. Nobody, probably remembers him now, but I looked at his stuff a lot. And then we got Time, and I read all the cartoons in Time magazine. I got very interested in Oliphant and what he was doing. And also we got Life, and Renan Lurie was in Life magazine. And so I saw a lot of his cartoons when I was a little kid. And I was particularly attracted to Oliphant's work. And then through junior high, Watergate happened. And I just read all the cartoons, and Conrad and Oliphant and Peters and Malden and Herblock and all those guys, and then McNally came along in the late, early mid 70s, and he just wasted Carter, and I really liked Jimmy Carter, but he was so good that I liked his cartoons despite of the fact that he was, really, I think, dreadfully unfair to Jimmy Carter, frankly, with all due respect to Jeff, who was personally a really nice guy. Yeah. And I doubt would even be a Republican at this, as we understand it. And I remember, lots of other cartoonists whose work I liked. I remember there was a very good cartoonist at the Chronicle, who I would see in Time a lot, and he wound up becoming the expert on the Zodiac Killer. There's a movie,
Yeah.
and Jake Gyllenhaal plays Bob Graysmith, who's still alive. So those are some of my early influences, and I apologize for my verbosity.
No.
Adam's used to it.
Well, I started out drawing for my college newspaper. I initially wanted to go into, I mean, I loved cartoons in general, not necessarily editorial cartoons when I was really young. I thought history was irrelevant and dry, and nothing really pulled me in until until I lived through. It sounds like similar to Jack, like living through some turbulent times really kind of tuned him in more into current events and history and the same
Like
thing.
when MTV changed, is that what you would define? What are you, 40? I mean, come on, man.
Like it was 9/11. I mean, before
Oh,
9/11,
okay, gotcha.
yeah. So no, I mean not when I was younger, when I was a teenager, nothing close to anything would move the needle when it comes to when it came to that. I remember drawing, actually my first editorial cartoon was in middle school. It was for a contest that Tom Tolles had for local students, and now I run the editorial cartoon contest in the Buffalo area. I had
Oh,
got like a second place or something for a Bill Clinton cartoon. And
yeah, yeah.
again, it felt like it was fun to draw, but it felt like an assignment. I remember meeting Tom, and he is so tall, and as a kid, he just was like this tree of a man, and I just thought, I was just in awe. And I went down to the Buffalo News, and it felt like, when it was built as a newsroom, the building we used to be in, and it felt like that Washington Post type building. And so there was like an allure and a magic that I had starting then, even though I
Uh,
didn't have that real interest in current events or history, like I said, until freshman year of college when I lived through 9/11. And that kind of sucked me in. I started going to Canisius for computer science and math, which sounds like it's unrelated to cartooning, but years later I realized it's great for, I mean, all I was doing in computer science and math was learning how to speak in metaphor and symbolism. The
yeah,
higher level math courses and even computer science, you're just learning new languages with symbolism of numbers and letters and problem solving and
yeah,
thinking in different ways. So a lot of those same mental processes, there had a strange overlap to speaking in metaphor with cartooning. So I would take art courses in college, but really it was my honors thesis and my work in the honors program. You could choose your concentration, and I started just looking more into editorial cartooning, and I wrote a thesis on it. And that was when I learned a lot about what was out there in terms of my past artists and current artists that inspired me,
yeah,
that I was unaware of before. I think initially, because this was right around after 9/11 and the Iraq War was starting to amp up, I started drawing political cartoons for the school paper. Beforehand, it was like a comic strip that was poking fun at its
yeah.
student life and campus life. So once I started focusing on politics, I was actually hooked by Steve Sachs'
Oh,
charcoal like drawings, and
yeah.
he was, I think, he just hammered the Bush administration with the Iraq War. And
Yeah,
his I thought his drawings were just so magical. And then I started discovering the world of editorial cartooning, and following the work of like Matt Davies,
yeah,
Jack, this guy on the other line here, who's also inspired me.
yeah.
And I went to my first cartooning convention in Lexington, Kentucky.
Oh,
Another hero of mine, Joel Pett. That was
yeah.
my first convention, and I talked the dean at Canisius into sending me and covering my way,
Oh,
because I
cool.
was writing my honors thesis on this. I don't know how I managed to pull that off, but little did they know they're handing out bourbon at every event.
Did
And
did we meet in Lexington?
I maybe briefly,
You know, I just
I
keep
remember
thinking
meeting you,
Lexington,
but we
where
didn't
my
really connect.
yeah. Yeah, Trudeau was at that convention.
I remember that I
Oh,
met
wow.
Trudeau. Yeah,
Hmm.
Were
that
they a
was
lot
cool.
bigger back then? I'm kind of curious. I always get from when I talk to other they say that the conventions at that time were just a lot larger and stuff as compared
Oh,
to today.
several hundred,
Yeah,
Okay.
lots. You didn't get to everybody at the early ones. I mean, there were lots of people I didn't talk to. You know,
Okay.
everybody kind of formed these little cells, and like
right.
kind of in the Ramirez, Lukovich, Kelly, Rogers, group. I was just going to say about Steve Sack. My first cartooning job was at the Minnesota Daily, where I had to succeed Steve Sack.
Oh,
And wow, I mean, this guy could do whatever he wanted.
yeah.
And he was a little older, I mean, I was 17 when I started at the Minnesota Daily, and he was at that time probably mid 20s, so that's a lot of time, for artistic growth.
Yeah.
And he couldn't have been more personally generous. He went down to Fort Wayne, Indiana, Journal Gazette, and he'd write me these incredibly elaborate, big poster type letters with all these cartoons on them. And yes, I still have them. And
Yeah.
just with lessons. This guy is like not only a world-class art talent, he's just the nicest guy.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, he would send me, I wrote my honors thesis and interviewed him as part of it, and it was just an excuse to call him. And he ended up sending me like these little packets of wonderful old illustrations, like styles that could be inspiring. And he was the sweetest guy. He's always been kind of a mentor in a way.
Yeah, he is just unbelievable. And I mean, and most of the cartoonists are really nice people, and accessible, and with a couple of exceptions of people who are gone now. I don't want to say their names, but he was always and really shy. That's the weird. He's not like me. He's not an extrovert, and so anyway. But yeah, Christ, I was really inspired by Steve Sack too. I mean, I gotta say.
Okay. Well, okay. Well, I guess my next question is just about craft and stuff. How do you guys create your cartoons, and what's your schedule? I mean, you both are dailies, right, and stuff. So I'm guessing it's a lot. I've been a weekly for a long time, so I'm a lot more drawn out.
I guess I'll go because Jack just spoke. I'm kind of in the midst of an evolution of that. Things are changing a little bit, but generally speaking, and things just changed for me recently when we shifted our deadlines in the last October. Right now I do 5 cartoons a week, and some other things from time to time, like I'm, this editorial cartoon student contest that we get lots and lots of entries with. But my daily process is I actually have a noon color cartoon deadline that I have to finish. So after I get the kids off to school at like 8 a.m., it's crunch time right away. And typically I'll have, really the night before and the day before had been like thinking ahead and planning ahead what topics I've been doing, so that I can, by about 10 a.m. have my, between 8 and 10 a.m. it's really, right now it's condensed. I already know my topics, but I'll also keep the news on in the background, and I'll be reading a little bit. So if anything big happens, I'll try to act quickly. But by 10 a.m. or so, I will have as many sort of concepts fleshed out in rough form between, often, ideally, 2 to 5 or more. And then from there, I will, because I'm working remotely these days, I will be like, texting or talking to my editor and some other writers at the Buffalo News. I'll text them some of these ideas to see how they react to them, just to kind of, it's more just testing out how they communicate more than anything.
Yeah.
Because it is hard working remote as artists that are really mass communicating. And
Yeah.
I think it's more for catching anything or making sure things are clear. Also seeing how they react in terms of any humor or anything like that. So once I'm sifting through that and I show my editor what I'm working with, he also gives me his opinion, but we have a good relationship where he's like, let me know which one you want to do. He's there to give his feedback, but also in rare occasion to be like, this is not going to fly. But typically he'll give his favorite or say, I like these 2 or 3, and then just let me know by 10:30 if you can, like which direction you're going in, so we can forward that to the editor-in-chief. And I'll try to get the line work done. I do work like, with pen and ink on a larger Bristol board. and like where I'll draw the cartoons a little bigger than twice the size as they appear in the newspaper.
Yeah.
And so I'll work with like microns with pen and ink, scan that in as a color, almost like a high res color photo, and then I transfer that to my iPad. And my iPad, I use Procreate these days to color my
Yeah.
cartoons. So I just have it in multiple layers. And since I've been printing in color every day, which is partly why the deadlines are now noon, we're printing the newspaper in like several hours away, which is a topic for another conversation. It's a head scratcher, but it's saving them money.
Yeah.
But it's allowing us to print more in color. So so after I color my cartoons, which takes another half an hour, typically 20 minutes to 40 minutes,
Yeah.
depending on the density of it, I will convert that to two different formats, one for print, which will have, all my black on the K channel. So they print really nice and sharp. And then I'll manage the web, and then I'll upload the other to the website in the syndicate. So I'll have my sort of web color version and then my print version. So that should all be done by noon. And then after that, I'm, uploading stuff, making social media posts and engaging with my readers a bit. And then at the end of the day, I will sort of start working ahead for the following day. And, and it's not always clean cut like that. That's
Yeah.
a typical day, but there'll be some days where I'll be drawing 2 cartoons, or trying to, sometimes if I have a series of ideas that are timely, I'll try to crank them out in sequence.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm curious to see if Jack's process is different at all. I'm actually itching to change it up. I'm not happy with the Procreate.
Oh, you're
It's
not?
hard because you get into a rhythm and it works and
Yeah.
it's quick, but like there has to be room for, I get every year or two, I get sort of not liking my work. I mean, in general, I'm very critical, but I'll like get kind of tired of the process or want to try
Yeah.
a different type of color. So I'm itching for kind of like something new. Uh, but I do think I would love to actually do watercolor. It's not going to save time, but like physical watercolor, like how Matt Davies does, like it just feels like it would be very natural and therapeutic and have a great feel. Like a lot of my cartoons, I try to mimic that look, like a watercolor texture.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if I print them on watercolor paper, they do have that look and feel, but there is something to the hand-drawn look,
Yeah. I do. I water down acrylic and put it in watercolor paper, but it takes a long time to dry. I have a week
Yeah.
and stuff, I mean, I don't have a set schedule anymore, but if you're thinking of time and stuff, I don't know about watercolor, but I when
No.
but being a weekly and stuff, I have that luxury of waiting for the paper to dry. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the trouble with watercolor, Adam and Angelo, is that you can't reverse engineer it.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And I'd love to do my cartoons in watercolor. I mean, that would be great. It's just like one screw up and then you're in patches and then it doesn't look right and so on. When I started in cartooning in 1978, there were no laptops, there was no Photoshop, there was no Adobe, nothing. It was just you take the cartoon to the printer, and the
yeah,
print shop, the composing room. And I mean, I lived in the composing room environment for 20 years probably. We had dumb terminals, at our desks my entire career. When I started the Minnesota Daily, there was a copy desk and they used glue pods to stick together copy, you know.
um,
And interestingly, Kevin Stiers was at Minnesota the same time I was, and he worked over in production.
yeah,
I knew him in passing. We weren't friends at the time. We're very close now. But the process is weird. I mean, when I got in, everybody was doing something called, duotone.
yeah,
And so this is the type of paper that, for people who are watching this, there are 2 different chemicals. One brings up a single shade and then the other brings up a double shade that's darker. And McNally was a master of duo shade, and so everybody wanted to do that and was very influenced by that duo shade. And Pat was doing it. he did it probably before anybody, and in a mass scale.
I did duo shade for like 1 month when I started in 2004, and I think that's when it
all
it
changed.
ran out, and that was it.
Yeah, they closed,
Oh.
how graphic arts, but I mean it was expensive, and again, couldn't reverse engineer it. It was, boy, you had to be super careful with it, and and now all my duo shade originals are ruined because they fade. My process now is rather similar to Adam's, which is brush and ink on Strathmore, vellum surface. And then I use the dumbest shit ever. I mean, I was using Winsor Newton Series 7s, and you can't really get those now. And so I'm using a $6 Peterson brush, which works just fine, honestly. And then I do my lettering with, literally, it has to be a Flair pen, the brand.
Yeah.
And then I do my cross hatching with the Uniballs. And then once in a while, I have some, those beige, what are those, microns or something? What are those called? Adam remembers. Do you have a computer science degree, Adam? Is that what I heard?
That's right. Yeah.
Well, at least you'll have a job after this all blows up.
Well,
I didn't know that.
Dated, I
Well, I'm
I
going to be
wrote my
asking about.
original.
Yeah.
Well, we can talk
Just
about
a dated
Fortran
degree.
later, but the process, and then I take the black and white and throw it on the scanner and run it through Photoshop. And Adam's got a wonderful kind of soft palette color, and mine is really bang color, and when I first started using Photoshop, it was a mystery to me. I still work in one layer. I just can't, I don't want to, I don't have enough time to like back up, and I mean, wouldn't it be great? I mean, I guess I know how to do it, but like, I'm always like, I'm on deadline. I don't have time to screw with this. I got to just blast right through it. I do not make two separate online, print versions. I mean, I know everybody else does because they're smart. And Steve Greenberg has tried to show me 7,000 times. And others, and so, yeah, the yellows are off in the print product, definitely. But to me, it's more, I have to write a political column and do 8 cartoons a week now.
Yeah.
And when I was at the former employer, I was doing 5 and a column, and I was deputy California opinion editor. Okay, so like what I was trying to do was transition more over to what they do, so that I could, be a utility player, which I am now. But unfortunately, I'm 63, so what, right? But like, to me, the process, it's my originals. I'll bet Adam has this experience too. You just like, you make a mistake and you just say, screw it, I'll just run it through Photoshop. I'll fix Photoshop. I hate that.
Well, what I found, and it's some originals, if I want to preserve a certain original, it's difficult because I used to draw so much more for black and white print that my originals were denser and they would look better standalone without the color. Now I want them to still look good without color, but you could tell that they're lighter. They're not as dense because really everything's printing or being viewed online in color for me now. But if I like an original and I do mess up, I actually take an X-Acto knife and
you don't go to the eraser in Photoshop.
Lightly, I do often use Photoshop for some changes and cleaning up things, toning that. But if there's an original that I do like that I want the original to have an integrity. If it's an easy fix, sometimes it's not a difficult thing to very lightly with a very sharp X-Acto knife remove the very top layer. And it does, just part, some, I remember seeing old originals that had non-photo blue. It's just part of the sort of authenticity of the original. I don't do it all the time, but it was in a pinch at one point that I got frustrated when I made a line in an area I didn't like. And I just grabbed my X-Acto knife and I lightly scratched it off. And I've been
I made great use of reducing and enlarging copiers, and now I don't really have access to one,
Mm.
but I would blow my lettering up so it would look,
Yeah.
much more texture on the lettering, and again, and doing it deliberately kind of fuzzy in the in original form, but like, yeah, some days I'd say half the time I have a clean original, and half the time it's like it's a Rubik's cube. It's like,
Right.
well, move that over there, and that
Yep.
spacing's not right, and I'll take that and center it in the balloon. A lot of my balloons are just off center, where if I gave it to somebody, they're not going to notice anything.
Exactly. And I'll have moments where I'll just do a little redo that balloon or redo this cloud on a separate piece of paper. I scan both at the same time, Photoshop,
And then just put it
mash them
in, right?
together. Yeah.
I've done that. I've got a simple copier here, but I used to I just was on that copier all day.
Yeah. Do you like the cut and paste aspect of your, well, because it sounds like, well, for both of you, the original is just the base. It seems like you guys like the cut and paste aspect of doing a cartoon, if you guys have the time. Is
You
that
mean
right or is that wrong?
on the original?
I guess for both the original and when you do Photoshop, because for you, if you're doing the copy machine a lot, I'm assuming you're doing a lot of cut and paste, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was part of my process that you just factor in the time. Photoshop is great because it saves time.
Yeah.
And when I first started doing color, I was using Prismacolor,
Oh,
markers on a copy.
yeah.
And you could get some really cool effects with that. I mean, I've always prided myself on having an original style and having an original color palette, and doing it differently than, now everybody's different. But when I started, there was a lot of similarity in styles with some artists, and
Yeah.
I looked my stuff. Of course, I was slavishly trying to look like Jeff McNally, like 28 other guys,
Yeah.
and that generation before, they were all trying to do Oliphant, and so, but we all eventually, come to our own look.
So
Yeah.
like stylistically, when I started, I feel like because I didn't grow up following editorial cartoons, I just discovered them in college. I feel like I was really drawn to like David Levine, the New York Review of Books, and even Thomas Nast with just the dense cross-hatching. And it just
Yeah.
like that, it just was, I just found it to be interesting. And it was, and so I didn't have sort of that, just because of the time that I started. I didn't have, like Jack was saying, like certain points in history, like my predecessor, Tom Toles, he's wildly original visually, but then before him, it was Bruce Shanks. Both of those cartoonists had won Pulitzers, but Shanks, who was beautiful in his artwork, at the time, like all these cartoonists looked very similar. This like sort of gouache kind of charcoaly look that was a vertical format and like a Herblock type style. Like I feel like there was these large eras in editorial cartooning where there was a really strikingly homogenous look.
Yeah.
And today is much more of like every artist is their own, which is very cool. But for me, it was like some of these influences were non-editorial cartoonists, like I said, David Levine
Yeah.
with his illustrations, but then also like Ed Sorel, who
Yeah.
again I look nothing like, but it's so I was always envious of the like organic, fast, quick nature. And I think since I started to now, and I have hopefully in 10 to 20 years, if I'm around, that I'm going to push more and more toward looseness. That's I think my Achilles heel. It had been, I had in my process, I used to draw on a printer paper, and then I would redraw that concept on Bristol board, and each iteration of it was stiffer and stiffer. And so
Yeah.
now I often find that my very quick like doodles that are the concept to show my editors sometimes are very fast.
Yeah.
Sometimes I like the gesture or the composition or the simplicity of what I did, and I'll lightbox my own sketches to make sure that I'm like capturing
The
that
looseness of the
looseness
line.
and to make it look less overdone. And it's, which is funny because a lot of my stuff still looks overdone. So I think my goal is to
No, it does.
is to
No, it doesn't.
I need to edge myself more toward like more of a loose kind of look, and that's kind of
Yeah, I'll let you know when it's overdone. You're not overdone.
Well, I
Do you
think
ever
it's
do the one of the things I like to do that's really great about Photoshop is I'll take the paint bucket with black and I'll hit whatever element of the drawing, and sometimes one or two paint buckets on a caricature. Wow, that really makes it sing, and you can't do that in the old way, and
right.
you want that foreground to pop, and nobody notices. It's fine, it's just terrific.
now both of you are past and present and current presidents of the AAEC, and you both have seen the decline of the American editorial cartooning profession as newspapers have declined. Now, I have a two-part question. One, what are the advantages of an editorial cartoonist being in a newspaper? And two, what are the challenges that an editorial cartoonist face as they try to thrive in outside of a newspaper environment?
Maybe Adam should go first, and then I can rant and rave.
Okay.
Well, Jack would probably have a better answer to both sides of the coin because he's current president, and also has experience in different newsrooms and in more of a freelance situation. I'm, for better or for worse, my entire career has been, since I was 1 year out of college, had been in the Buffalo News since 2004. So this is my 20th year at the Buffalo News.
Hey, congratulations.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. It's weird. It doesn't feel like that because
To another 30.
What's that? So I don't know, for me though, I'm preparing for any kind of, there's two parts of it. First, I think there is a great strength for a cartoonist and lots of advantages for a cartoonist to be on staff at a newspaper or a media company. And I think it's better to think of it as a media company because there are, and I hope in the future, companies like, Politico's a newspaper, but it's online only, that has Matt Worker as a cartoonist. And I've seen Steve Breen join a media company to draw cartoons. It's not a paper. So I think in the future, we should start thinking of just, instead of newspapers, digital companies or media companies that want to hire, an artist that has a voice. I think being on staff at a newspaper gives you stability. And if it's the right mix, if it has the right leadership, it gives you a lot of autonomy, while at the same time giving you support and stability where you don't need to worry about the hustle as much, and you can focus more on your work and whatever you can be to the newspaper as a utility type of worker. I think it also connects, for me, it connects you to your local community a lot. And with the local cartoons, with sports cartoons, that type of thing. And it gives you, it allows you to be part of a newsroom that is full of, resourceful and intelligent and wonderful people that can help strengthen your work. However, I think cartooning in general has always been an independent operation in a way, because it's the outlier in the newsroom. It's very independent. It's like a visual column, but it's even more so because it's a visual, and there are not many people visual in a newspaper. So in general, because of the state of where we're at, I think all cartoonists, even staff cartoonists, there are very few left, are looking for ways to be valuable, even if it's outside of their newspaper. And just think about maybe a post-print world in terms of how things would operate. And for me, I've been, I broke away from politics to do this book on Buffalo art several years back, and it was very popular in the Buffalo area. We sold out all the print runs, and that just evolved into several different murals around town, creating illustrated murals in Buffalo, which has been fun. and then just partnering and doing different things that aren't necessarily political cartoons, but are utilizing my skills and connecting me to Buffalo. Like I'm working with a company that creates high-end wallpaper to possibly do some kind of interesting, Buffalo themed or politically themed wallpaper art. And so thinking like being open to wherever the journey goes outside of political cartoons, I think is an important part of not doing everything just, to be attached to the newspaper. So it shows the newspaper that I'm valuable in many other ways, and it shows the Buffalo community that I have many different facets. And I think in a world where I'm not employed by the news, I would accelerate all those things and have to deal with hustling in many ways that many of my colleagues do. And I would learn from them. And a lot of it is getting your own subscriber base. And for me, like having my own social media following and building that up,
Yeah.
Which is also overlapping, but separate from the newspaper's own subscribers.
Yeah.
And then in a post-newspaper world, having those personal followers help support you as one component of all this. But again, I don't know as much because I'm still fortunate to have, full employment and be on staff at a newspaper. And like, we're also changing the Buffalo News, that's evolving. So I'm trying to do some like local projects and longer term things and add to my local work. So I'm just trying to be as valuable as I can, and be a part of this as long as I can before I have that inevitable future of multitasking in many ways.
Yeah.
So I mean, Jack can speak more to this, and because I feel like he's done it all.
Yeah.
Can you please ask the question again?
Oh, well, just that, what are the advantages of an editorial cartoonist being in a newspaper? And then what are the challenges that an editorial cartoonist have when they're outside of a newspaper environment?
Buddy, I've been in therapy for months after I got fired
Yeah.
for no reason.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not the only one, but I honestly thought it wasn't going to happen to me because I had diversified my portfolio within that company. I can speak to the advantages of working on a strong daily newspaper that supports you. Number one, they give you legal cover.
Yeah.
And all the things that Adam mentioned times 10, just being around other journalists who, you can bounce ideas off of and, have this community that gets you and you get them, and it's a mutual support system. I miss that terribly.
And the thing that is really frustrating, like Jack had mentioned, is like with Kevin and Jack and others, and this is a lesson for myself, I can believe that I am super valuable to my newspaper. I provide essential local cartoons, a unique national voice. I'm doing the student cartoon contest that's very popular. I'm going to do some long-term projects that are like local, teaming up with a reporter. I can in my head think that I'm being very valuable in so many ways. I do public speaking events, I'm doing murals around town, but at the drop of a hat, the leaders at Lee, which is a corporate entity, can decide this is not what we just don't want visual opinion. We don't want satire that can upset people. So I can wake up one day. I mean, for me, it's a little tricky because I have some guild protection, but that's still doesn't save me.
It's an emotional thing, and because I consider myself a newspaper person.
Yeah.
And when I lost that, the first instinct I had was to find another newspaper. And so I was offered this very delightful opportunity with the Chronicle and as a columnist, really. And I mean, doing a couple of cartoons on the side. And so what I tried to do is transition over to being a columnist.
Yeah.
And think of myself not as a cartoonist, but just like kind of this multi-platform creator, and although, you're still pigeonholed as an old cartoonist, but, the Chronicle saw me for what I was. And so, yes, I'm working on a book proposal right now for a major New York agency, and I think I've got a very good look at getting that book, going in the next, year or so. I have some other newspaper opportunities with as a freelancer that I'm pursuing. Um, you know, and then, but like the thing about where Adam is and where I was, which was we became community fixtures.
Yeah.
We went out to the Rotary, we emceed the events, we fundraised for, you name it, and went to the schools and so on. And broadly speaking, that's what newspapers are missing, is that ambassador for the newspaper that people follow, and see Jack Ohman is here. He's from the Bee. Now you don't have Jack Ohman out there, in Carmichael giving a talk, and people go away saying, "Wow, I met Jack Ohman. He's a really nice guy."
Yeah.
And but also, I'm certainly I was offered an opportunity on a major news website, and you can't rule anything out. And so my view is that there aren't going to be print newspapers real soon. I was just reading Martin Barron's book on the Washington Post and Bezos. There will be, those names, but it's going to be all digital. And I mean, as this insidious infiltration of the financials, let's keep it super broad here, of investment groups
Yeah.
who are just, they don't care about your local newspaper.
Yeah.
They do not. And so, I was president before Adam in 2014, 2015, and I'm the only AAC president to be president twice. That tells you where we are.
Yeah.
Because I had to do it one more time just so that we had some institutional knowledge and, continuity.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, newspapers have done virtually everything they can do to screw things up in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I was let go of my newspaper 2 years ago, but I'm different from you guys in the sense that for me, doing cartoons for a community newspaper was just something I did on the side. I had a regular job in a library, so I always felt like I was in a different level than you guys but also because a community newspaper is a little bit different than the Sacramento Bee or the Buffalo News, because it's community specific. I'm a Filipino American, but I've only been in the Philippines 1 month my entire life. So being in a community newspaper was a big connection to my self-esteem and to my culture, my cultural background. And when I was let go, I did the Philippine News Today for I think 11, 12 years. And I loved, I think similar to what you're saying, I loved that connection to the Filipino American community and the Filipino American readership. And now that it's gone, I feel kind of rudderless and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I feel rudderless, engineless, bottomless, sailless, you name it.
Yeah.
The thing that's to me that's missing besides the community connection is that the point that we've all not discussed today is these newspapers are not just getting rid of cartoons, they're getting rid of opinion.
Right. I think that's a scary thing. Yeah.
That's more than scary, because then imagine all those great small dailies and all those towns across the United States that, that like Art Cullen at the Storm Lake Times, or Tribune or whatever. And this guy's like got 3,000 subscribers, and people in Storm Lake need to read that newspaper, because otherwise they're, these people on these local school boards and local city councils and sheriff's departments, they're just going to run absolutely roughshod. And so,
Yeah.
you know, corporate America, you know, these investment groups, they're literally shutting down newspapers. There are news deserts. I spoke, and I, not to name drop, but I talked to him, Hakeem Jeffries, a couple months ago about this for about 15 minutes. And that they're very concerned in Congress about this. I talked to Speaker Pelosi a couple months ago when I saw her over in San Francisco, and she just said, "Oh yeah, Alden."
Yeah.
You know, and I mean,
Talking
they're
about like
watching.
you're talking about news deserts, right? Where there's deserts where there's no local newspapers.
Right.
Well,
Right. And the opinion aspect of it, the newspapers that are still there are and not in a position of strength. So
Yeah.
they are sort of taking cues from some of these large giant media companies like Meta, who are going away from opinion and suppressing posts that have political opinion, because they don't want to upset people. And I think because newspapers aren't as much in a position of strength as they used to be, they're more sensitive to upsetting people and
Yeah.
advertisers. So they know that opinion content, important, strong opinion content, may do that, and especially cartoons. And I think so far, knock on wood, you know, I've been lucky in that my editor, who's relatively new, my editorial page editor, who's been with me for 15 years, and the Lee opinion editor, he's the editorial page editor in Madison.
Yeah.
He specifically, they want to own opinion, and they are promoting Phil Hands, who draws in Madison. They promote him on the main page of the website, almost like a top news story. And I've been speaking with him and my immediate editor, and they love this idea of really just owning it more.
Yeah.
But I feel like that he, you know, that's not the common, position of newspaper
Gannett,
editors.
Yeah.
I can't remember who owns the Buffalo News.
So the Buffalo News used to be, for years and years, it was Warren Buffett. It was actually the only, before he had a small portion of the Washington Post, but it was the first and only like full large newspaper that he owned for years. And he had,
Of
you know,
Omaha.
and
Yeah.
then Omaha as well.
Yeah.
And the Buffalo News, he was extremely hands off with. He had a longtime publisher, Stan Lipsey, who he gave him autonomy, and Stan did not really interfere in editorial. And it was really decades where the news had like I think the highest penetration rate of any newspaper in the country. It was like 7 or 8 out of 10 eyeballs it would reach in Western New York. And they were just, you know, we were like a little bit behind the squeeze of everybody else, just based on the historic nature we've had with Warren Buffett, and our community is very obsessed with itself. Buffalonians love to consume anything Buffalo. So they've always been good supporters of the Buffalo News. And now in the last, 5 to 6 years, we felt so much of that pain that everybody else has been feeling. I mean, the last 10 years, but now that so we are owned by Lee now, Lee Enterprises. So Warren Buffett, when he sold the news, the way we're told is he tried to avoid it going to a company like Alden. So it was almost like the lesser of two evils, is the way we were kind of told. And Oregonet. So I feel like Lee, and from what I've heard, seems to be less a bad actor than Gannett, and especially Alden, in terms of how it lets its individual papers operate with some autonomy. It's still a battle, though. The Buffalo News is really one of only 2 larger flagship papers in Lee. And so they have all these policies that treat us like one of their hundreds or dozens of small community newspapers. But you can't treat their larger papers like that. There needs to be autonomy. So there's a battle every week, every month, in terms of really trying to wrestle back. And this is even from our own publisher, wrestle back control of every little thing to kind of make sure that we strengthen what we have, because we've had a lot of people walk out the door in the last 5 years, and it's been hard to watch. So I'm feeling now what a lot of my colleagues have been feeling in their newsrooms, 10 to 15 years ago.
Well, Gannett just eliminated opinion entirely. I mean, Gannett was a very one of my largest clients, you know, and to describe how the business has changed. When I started in syndication in 1981, I'm going to give you the figure, what I earned in 1981. I would get $13,000 a month, $11,000 a month in national syndicate. Do the
Wow.
CPI on that. That's probably $30,000, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Unfortunately, I had children, so they took it all. But you know, but fast forward to today, I won't tell you what I make. But it's no individual, hardly any individual newspapers buy cartoons anymore. It's all group buys by the, you know, Gannett and, you know, the other media companies. And so, yeah, if you Gannett picks you up, fantastic. You're in 236 papers. But then they got rid of opinion, and that was a big chunk of my income when I, you know, was at the Washington Post Writers Group for 6 years. And I thought that was going to be my forever home, the Washington Post, you know, and we didn't bring up earlier about how obsessed I was with All the President's Men, you know,
Yeah.
and wanting to be somehow associated with the Washington Post. Then one day, you know, their editor calls us up and says, yeah, hey, they're getting rid of cartoons and comic strips because it's not part of their long-term strategy. You know, and then I'm reading Martin Barron's book on the Post and Bezos, and he describes him as a very good owner. And I thought, you know, with all due respect, look what happened to the Washington Post after Tolles left. And not with any sort of personal animus towards any of the people who contribute to it, but they atomized the position.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, Herblock, hello, they got an
Well,
award named after him. You know?
right. They not only did they honor the seat with giving it to an individual that could try and live up to the reputation of the paper and what the standards are. And when you farm it out like that, it waters it down. But they also, and again, I'm not going to name any names, but some of the stuff that they will pick, it's not necessarily the artist, but like some of the individual cartoons that they will select. It's clear that they're moving away from cartoons that really throw a heavy punch. You know,
they're New Yorker cartoons done by New Yorker cartoonists.
Some of them are actually not editorial cartoons. And then you have the Pulitzer that has really changed the nature of the prize, that it's not, you know, you can give it to visual reporting or some type of illustrated reporting that it's apples and oranges. So you have an award that covers multiple functions. And, you know, I think there was like it was almost like illustrated the other year, sort of cleverly illustrated infographics, which were very beautiful and very cool and interesting. But again, it's not the same thing. It's apples and oranges.
I mean,
Well,
I was very proud to win the Pulitzer, and I still am. You know, Gail Collins wrote me and a couple other people who were on the jury after, you know, Adam and I have been on juries. I was on the jury in 2020 and 21. And so the first year they went, you know, to Barry Blitt, who was our fourth choice. And I love Barry Blitt and I love his work. Okay. God bless him. That's how it works sometimes. The second year we named Marty Tubles, you know,
is that the one with
Tom
Lalo?
Dancing Bug, you know, and Reuben Bowling, and Ken Fisher is his name, and then Lalo.
Lalo, yeah.
When they just walked away from, wow, you could have the first Native American Pulitzer winner, you could have the first Latino, you know, Pulitzer winner. Wow, you could have had this very inventive guy, Ken Fisher, you know, who's just a genius. They're all brilliant. And then they went no award.
Yeah.
Is
What's
this the
scary?
nature? I'm curious. Is this the nature of a nonprofit journalism, a nonprofit versus for-profit journal? It seems like a lot of it, if you want to be independent, it's dangerous to need a wealthy benefactor to have independent journalism.
Well, you can't, they don't, look, I mean, God bless the Pulitzers, you know, but there's a heavy, you know, institutional, shall we say, bias towards the major media companies. And for, somebody like Marty Two Bulls, who's working in South Dakota for, Indian country today, well, they don't have people on the Pulitzer board.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Gail Collins wrote me and said, hey, what would you do? And so I wrote her, God, I don't know, 2,500 word memo about what to do with the category. I said, keep the original editorial cartooning category. You're still getting 80 entries. Then have, something like a graphics journalism, category where all those, quite frankly, those are very interesting, wonderful things that folks do. And I've done them. I mean, when I was a finalist in 2012, that was my entire nomination, was multi-panel, investigative cartoons, for it's not an original phrase, but going into the community, going into the homeless camps, doing all that stuff. And I did it. And, that was the year Matt Worker won, who absolutely deserved it, but people were doing this for a long time before. And what they did was I just did the absolute polar opposite of what I suggested they would do, which is smash the award into apples and oranges, or, apples and Phillips screwdrivers as well.
Right. This is probably more accurate.
Yeah.
And
Adam,
I mean, the thing is,
I interrupted you. So I think yeah, okay, go ahead.
I was just, and thinking about where we're at in the future of editorial cartooning, to me, it's just political expression and political art. I mean, it's art with a voice, and that's always been around, and it always will be around. And the difference is you want it to have backing by institutions. And if it doesn't, if we have a future where media companies or institutions like the Pulitzer aren't supporting strong visuals that have a voice, strong political art that will still be there. It'll just be more of a subversive underground thing, and our society and our democracy will be weaker. You can't fully cut that out, but if it's not going to be one element, a strong element in our media landscape, then our sense of free speech will be eroded, and we're going to be poor as a nation for it. So I'm hoping it wouldn't go there. I don't think you can eliminate it. It just won't be. People won't go into it because it won't be. Right now, it's not a big enough profession to allure artists that want to have a voice. But I think you have young artists on Instagram and out there that are producing things that would resemble a cartoon by definition, but don't look like a traditional editorial cartoon, and that's great. But they're also, I can name a few of them in my head, or I could picture their handles, and they create really great work, but I don't know if that's their main income source. And these are more just individual outliers. I think it's a combination of, they may be able to have their own subscriber set based on a Substack. Instagram, you can have subscribers, you can have Kickstarter campaigns, you can create books of your work. So they're just like working artists. But without that institutional support, those voices aren't as numbered and aren't as strong.
Yeah, I'm wondering. I talked to a cartoonist. I think it was I forgot his name now, but he was mentioning, we tend to view political cartooning and editorial cartooning as journalism, but in other countries and stuff, some political cartoonists view themselves as activists. As I'm wondering, as editorial cartooning becomes unmoored to the newspaper and stuff, and as cartoonists have to they develop these niches and stuff. I'm wondering if this is just something that popped in my head. Do they view themselves, because it's Adam, you're talking about artists in social media who are doing political stuff.
It is more of like an activist type of role. Yeah, it's like this Jesse Duquette, and there's other cartoonists that are creating. They're passionate about their interests, and they are probably social activists, if you want to call them that, and artists. And I wrote my honors thesis is on editorial cartooning, and it was, is it art or journalism? How much of it is it primarily a form of art? Is it primarily a form of journalism? How much of it is both? And yeah, I think it changes the nature of it. If you are not backed by an institution, you are really your own brand, essentially, the changes the nature of your work, where like Jack had mentioned, you're with a newsroom, you're going in as part of, you're working with a writer sometimes, you know, possibly, and doing this graphics journalism. You won't do that as an individual activist. You are just pushing your own, you know, beliefs in a way that maybe the paper would be uncomfortable with. So there's a little more freedom there, but also it changes what you go after with your work. You might change your scope to more national or international to get the most followers, instead of connecting yourself with the community that you're rooted in. I think you lose that community connection when you don't have the community institution backing you.
Well, I really disagree with the premise that a cartoonist should be an activist. And not only that, I think that this generation of young journalists, they do think of themselves as activists. Look at the Washington Post. Look at the Washington Post. You know, they've had one newsroom insurrection after another with, you know, reporters under 30 years old who are literally activists.
Yeah.
And you know, God, I mean, I've been doing this for 45 years, and I did cartoons about Bill Clinton, you know, and I did cartoons about Mike Dukakis, and I did cartoons about a lot of people, you know, who I was, you know, basically kind of in alignment with, but like I didn't give them a pass. And now we're in an environment where we're faced with not a Republican versus a Democrat, but, you know, the survival of American democracy.
Yeah, that's sort of what I mean.
Versus fascism and
Yeah.
authoritarianism. Well, am I an activist? Well, I guess I am now, you know, but I don't want to be. And
you know, I think the activism takes the journalism integrity away.
There's no journalism integrity.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean and stuff. But I was just thinking in terms of like in Hong Kong, the Hong Kong cartoonists who opposed mainland China, or in the Philippines, you know. I mean, most of the journalists, the cartoonists in the Philippines think of themselves as journalists and stuff, but there's less and less places. I think in the Philippines, a similar thing that what Jack was saying was, you know, during the Duterte era, some newspapers that criticized Duterte were bought out by Duterte allies.
Well, this is what's going to happen here if this guy gets elected again.
Yeah, and also other companies get sued, you know, in courts for libel and stuff, and the hope is they get so stuck in courts that they're you know, like a cartoonist told me that she had to water down her cartoons because Duterte would threaten the newspaper for libel and stuff.
Well, she's lucky she didn't wind up in a ditch, you know. I mean, that's the thing. And when you're in an environment like that, where do you think these major financial institutions that control a lot of America's newspapers are Democrats?
Yeah.
Do you think they care? You know, if you roll back the libel laws, well, I'm out of business.
Yeah.
You know,
is that happening though? I'm curious. Is there an attempt to do that right now, or is
well, if Trump is elected, you just watch it, it's all gone. It's all gone. And he said he wanted to, quote, loosen up the libel laws when he was president at a New York Times, or I think it was a New York Times Ed Board meeting. And you're like, well, what the hell, you know? I mean, if that's the environment you're working in, you're not working in a democratic, you know, free speech environment anymore. And then we've got to come to grips with that. And so, you know, I'm too old for the revolution, guys. You know what I mean? I'm sitting in my kitchen in Sacramento, and I just kind of like to make my observational humor, you know, available to the readers of the San Francisco Chronicle and a couple other newspapers. But at the end of the day, they force you to become an activist de facto because the stakes are so high. And if you're in an environment where you can't say what you need to say, you're not a commentator anymore, you're an illustrator.
Yeah. Okay. You know, we only have 5 minutes for this meeting. You want me to do one more meeting, or are you guys done for today and stuff? Because what I can do is ask you one more question. You know, what do you
Why don't you ask us one more question? We'll try to answer it really fast.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I apologize and stuff.
He's got young kids.
Yeah, okay. So I guess for both of you, what do you both love about editorial cartooning?
Well, I I consider myself a commentator, and I consider myself a writer who happens to be able to draw.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's just a natural extension of my own interests. I love the history of editorial cartooning. It's a unique art form within American journalism. It has a decade span going back to, the Revolution. And it's a fascinating, wonderful art form that is indigenous to American journalism, and that's why I love it and why I will always love it.
I feel like primarily I've always considered myself a creator. And I think you mentioned that, Jack, that um, with whatever I'm doing, I'd like to create something. So the idea of creating something that's my own from scratch, from a blank sheet of paper, there's sort of like a satisfaction I get out of that. I'm putting something into the world. And more these days, I've evolved into loving the connection with my community and with my readers, whether it's, you know, on any topic. And that's partly why I do some of the Bills cartoons or local cartoons. There is a connection there that is valuable. And that the feedback loop of having a voice and expressing that in a community, whether it's a national community or local, is very valuable. And I think speaking truth to power, the tradition of that in editorial cartooning, that has always also resonated with me and my personality over the years. So there's something about that that I feel is super valuable. And the truth that's under attack right now, I think gives a real importance to our craft at this moment.
Okay. Well, thank you both. I appreciate all of your insight. You know more about this than I do and stuff because and the community newspaper, I don't at least directly face the issue. I only face some of the consequences of the issues, but I don't, I don't know the intricacies of how it's, you gave a good insights for I guess both editorial cartoonists like myself and just the wider readership on the challenges that editorial cartoonists are facing nowadays. So thank you very much.